Hey there, everybody. Brett from Labets and the Belfry back for another horror vlog here. I have two movies to talk about, two that are quite the strange ones to talk about, a little bit obscure, but yeah, I'm here to talk about them. First one I'm going to cover is one I watched on Shudder recently that was made in the 70s, and this is a zombie movie called The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. This is quite an interesting movie. It has two central characters in this movie, one named George, one named Edna, and pretty much they end up meeting coincidentally because the character of Edna backs her car up into George's motorcycle and kind of wrecks it. So they end up traveling together to particular locations that they both are going to, and they kind of get lost along the way. And in the middle of that, George ends up finding these group of people with this big machine in this open field, and it's giving off this radiation for a mile or two on this farm, killing a bunch of pests and insects and any infestation of like bugs and such. Around the same time, the character of Edna ends up running into a zombie and has to fend herself off from this zombie on the way to finding her sister. And there we have our movie. This is quite the interesting watch. I actually would say I quite enjoyed myself watching this movie, especially for one that's I wouldn't even necessarily say this is a low budget film. Quality wise, it definitely has the look of a 70s movie, and definitely one that probably didn't have a very high budget. But I'm not sure if this was filmed in England or possibly Manchester, but I will say that like the actual like landscape of the movie is very, very pretty. There's a lot of like open fields that are filmed throughout this movie of where people are driving to and such. There is one very random scene in the opening credits of this movie. Randomly, there's all this traffic like in the city area, and this lady has like this big coat on, and then she takes off the coat and she's completely naked, and then she runs across the street in the middle of traffic. And I thought there was going to be context to that. There's absolutely no context to that whatsoever. But maybe they just, it had to be filmed. Like it couldn't have really been just like they caught this lady and filmed her and then just like put the movie out, unless they got her permission. But it is quite the mystery of why that was just even in the opening credits, because it had nothing to do with the movie whatsoever. I think a lot of people who watch this movie are probably going to feel a little like annoyed because this was made in the 70s. The zombie genre wasn't around for very long at this point. I think this was like 1974 maybe, or like mid 1970s when this was made. So the zombie genre was kind of new at that time. And the rules of like zombies, most people have, even if you've never seen a zombie movie, most people know like, okay, to kill a zombie you got to destroy the brain, you got to shoot it in the head, take a blunt object to their head and destroy the brain. And the people in this movie don't really know that's what they're supposed to do. There's a couple times in the movie where someone has a gun and decides to shoot one of the zombies a couple times in the chest, and of course they're still going to keep coming. There's times where someone takes a weapon to them and like cuts off. I think there's one moment where a doctor like cuts off one of the zombies' nipples and such. Yeah, this is a fun. It's weirdly calming for like the beginning aspect. It is kind of a slow burn. It does ramp up a lot in the second half of this movie, though. That's when it starts off with like one corpse that just happens to be around and attacks a couple people, and then George and Edna are like the central characters just trying to figure out like what to do or to survive, and trying to alert people of the town. There's a detective who's like probably the most detestable character I've seen in a movie in quite a while. Like his his motto is basically like shoot everything in the face, ask questions later. And while that sounds funny, like that guy like follows that rule to a T in this movie. And I do think it's funny with this movie as well. Like, I mean, Edna is a fairly nice character and is a decent protagonist. George, as a protagonist, starts off as kind of a dick. Like right in the beginning, where like his motorcycle gets hit by Edna's car. Immediately, he's like, "Well, the least you could do is at least drive me to where I'm supposed to go," and like, and then just like claiming that he's gonna drive them there. Like he's driving this other lady's vehicle, even though it's like she was the one should be the one driving. She just kind of lets him drive, which is really odd. As I'm describing this movie, it sounds like people are like, this sounds like a terrible movie, but shockingly, it's not. And yeah, the rules of zombies, like people don't know the rules of how to kill a zombie. And, a lot of people end up getting killed because of that. Like they're, making an attempt, but it's not working because they're not aware. Maybe destroying the brain would help. But another flaw about this movie is there's this big scene in like a cemetery in this church where the two main characters are kind of stuck in a situation. Like they run into one of the corpses, and then other corpses end up coming to life. Now, normally this happens because of something like viral or some sort of virus. These other corpses that are like in like this hidden part of this church where all these dead bodies are, the main zombie you've been seeing for a while of the movie, he literally just takes blood from himself and he like wipes it on them. He like puts it on their face, and then all of a sudden they like are resurrected as an undead creature. And it's quite odd. I'm like, I don't think rubbing blood on somebody would do the trick, but I mean, I'm here for the ride, so okay, well, let's go with that. And surprisingly, some really gory scenes in this movie. I was not expecting as much blood and guts in this movie as I ended up getting. I was expecting kind of just Night of the Living Dead, like the gory moments are kind of tame. I was kind of expecting that, and no, surprisingly, like one character gets his guts, like literally gets his stomach ripped open. And I always think that's funny in like zombie movies or even like Walking Dead. Like the character of Dale like dies by getting his stomach ripped open by one zombie. And I'm just thinking like they must have finger strength of a god or something, because it's like, I don't think just putting your fingers on somebody and being able to rip their guts open, I don't know, that's just me though. But that does happen to a character in this movie. A number of people at this hospital, like the big climax of the movie is at this hospital, and the main character Edna, her sister, is like in this institution, so they're trying to like rescue her and everything. And more and more corpses are coming to life. There's somebody at like their front window when you first walk in. Like she ends up getting like literally ripped to pieces by like a couple of these corpses, and I'm like, that's insane. And I mean the practical effects were pretty decent, and I was enjoying myself watching this. And I mean, as far as the way this movie ends, I mean, it is a horror movie, and it is quite the bleak ending due to, I mean, your main characters don't exactly get a happy ending in this. And I mean, I will say the one silver lining is the detective, who's like the most despicable character, ends up getting his comeuppance in the end. I do think it's interesting that a movie like this ended up having like a reason of why zombies were coming or corpses were coming to life. It was quite interesting that it was just this machine giving off radiation of killing insects, that was what was causing the dead to come back to life. I mean, I kind of buy it, because I'm not a scientific person in that regard, so it was kind of like, all right, I mean, that's your reason. I mean, I can go with it. But it is funny how like a lot of zombie stuff doesn't really want to tell you the reason why people are zombies. They're just saying like, hey, just accept it. This entire event happened, and you don't have a reason for it. And I'm totally cool with that. But it was cool that, they kind of gave a reason for it. But I mean, I would actually recommend people check this out. If you like zombie flicks, like, this is one to definitely check out. I don't think it's perfect. I mean, obviously, me describing all of this, like, there is a lot of flaws in this movie, believe me. But I found myself just really enjoying myself watching this. And yeah, I mean, a lot of, zombie flicks, you just expect like pure chaos like the entire time. And if you're not a fan of slow burns or movies that take their time to get going, you may not like this. But if you're a gore hound, you like zombie stuff, and you've never heard of this movie, definitely check it out. I think this movie did have a different title, but I think the official title now is The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. But it's definitely one to check out. Like, I highly recommend it. If you have a Shudder account or like an AMC Plus account, check it out. You may end up enjoying it. I certainly did. All right, so our second feature in this double feature review here in my horror vlog, I'm actually going to talk about a new movie that just came out recently. And I had heard the title of this movie. I really didn't know much about it or what was going to go on in it. But I mean, the title sounded quite interesting. And that's the movie I Saw the TV Glow. It is probably, I mean, I'm gonna try and catch up on a lot of horror that has come out this year. I've seen some, but I do want to catch up on a lot more. But I will say this might be one of the most unique films I've seen this year, and it's quite like, honestly, a good comparison would be something like Donnie Darko with this movie. I was expecting like a horror movie. This really isn't a horror movie like on the surface level though. Like there's really nothing that's like blood and guts or like a straight up like thriller or like things just going a million miles an hour. This was a very slow movie. I do think it was a very calming movie though. I was quite enjoying myself watching this. There is a certain atmosphere throughout this movie that was really enjoyable. But the central premise, if you never heard of this, is there's our main character we're introduced to. He's this shy, awkward kid. He ends up befriending this one girl, and they kind of end up having this friendship over this one TV show called The Pink Opaque. And it's technically this TV show that's meant for kids, but it is quite the odd TV show, and you do see scenes from the TV show in this movie. And yeah, they kind of develop this relationship just based all around this television show. The one character that's like obsessed with the show and shows the main character this show and gets him into it, I think the name of this person was Maddie. I could be wrong on that, but she basically disappears like a little bit into the movie. And our main character, very shy person, doesn't really have a lot of friends and confines a lot in television and things to watch, and mostly this TV show, The Pink Opaque. And this is definitely a movie, I will say, I definitely don't want to spoil a whole lot of this movie. I think this is one of those movies that's better that you just go in and watch it and kind of have your own take on it. At least with my take, is I really enjoyed I Saw the TV Glow. Like I said earlier, it definitely is one of the most unique watches I think I will say I've done this year. And this is a movie that definitely is a lot up to interpretation. Not a lot of things are explained. So if you're not a fan of like slow burns, or you really have to pay full close attention to the movie and you kind of aren't explained much. If you like things kind of spelled out to you and like easy for you to understand in a film, this is definitely not the film for you. And I can't exactly say this is really a horror film. I think a lot of horror fans will watch this and probably really enjoy it. There are a couple of moments that are a bit out there and like in a horror fashion, stuff that just, horror fans will just really take to. But yeah, this is one of those movies that it is growing on me the more I think about it. Pretty much felt like I liked it. And in a way, it didn't really actually strike a chord with me, like on an emotional level. But I think this is one of those films that is absolutely going to do that to people. And I think those in the younger demographic will probably really take to this movie and really connect with it. I mentioned Donnie Darko earlier as like a good kind of comparison. And I say that in the fact that, like, there's parts of Donnie Darko that are easy to digest and watch, but there's a lot of things that you're kind of not sure of what that means, what this particular thing means, and such. And I definitely got that vibe from I Saw the TV Glow. I would say that this is definitely a movie that I would probably watch again at least once, and probably get a lot more out of it the second time. Because there are moments where I was a bit unsure of what I was kind of seeing and what I was supposed to take away from it. As far as gripes for this movie, I mean, this isn't giving away parts of the plot, but there is like a couple scenes where they're kind of at, like, the main characters are at this bar and there's bands performing, and there are just random moments of the movie where it just cuts to the band playing a part of a song for quite an extended period of time. And this doesn't happen just once. Like, I can't complain about the music. I actually really liked a lot of the music through this movie, and even some of the bands that they were showing like perform their song I actually did like. But it did this about 3 times, and by the third time I was kind of like, are you just filling out the runtime on this? Because this movie wasn't exactly, it wasn't a long movie, but I was feeling like, are you guys just trying to fill out the runtime to make this like a feature-length film? Like, by the third band I was kind of like, can we kind of move on at this point? But I'm sure those will probably watch this and like love every second of it. And as far as another complaint, there is a moment like in the last act of the movie where one of your main characters, Maddie, if I got the name wrong, I do apologize. I think that was her name in the movie. But Maddie goes on this extremely long monologue, and it is a really good scene, I will say that. There is a point though where like you kind of get what they're saying and you feel like it's going somewhere, and then it just kind of keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. I thought that scene, this really long monologue scene, I thought it did go a little bit too long. Like, it hit a point where I was like, all right, I get it. And it just kept going and going and going. And maybe I'm interpreting that scene wrong, but as far as my complaints, it was kind of like, yeah, it just hit a certain moment. I was like, gotcha. And it just kept going and going. But there was, yeah, like, there's a couple moments in this movie, like, it's not a horror movie. Some people will chalk it up as like, kind of a horror movie, and it has horror movie aspects to it. There's one moment towards the end of the film that is quite unsettling, based on like an existential, type feeling. And, stuff like that to me is quite horrifying and, quite strange. And I mean, yeah, as far as this movie goes, yeah, I really enjoyed I Saw the TV Glow. I think, based on my interpretation, a lot of people could definitely take this and say it's such a surface level interpretation, but it has a lot to do with escapism. At least to me, that's what I got out of it, of just really confining and how our world just feels like a prison sometimes, or pretty much all the time. You feel like you're just trapped. And just the escapism of like, TV or movies or, video games. It's just like, it's kind of this thing that we use to kind of cope with like dealing with real life, because real life just on the surface level is just, you know, I don't know. To me, a lot of real life is just really hard to live in, and just the real life aspect, that's, I mean, and I can relate to the main character in that aspect of just, kind of escaping to another world through like just a television show, or just, kind of losing yourself in something else that has nothing to do with real life. But at least what I got out of it was a lot about escapism and just kind of hiding who you are from the rest of the world. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take out from this movie, and I feel like I'm not doing much of it justice as far as, explaining it. And hopefully I didn't spoil too much for you, just simply talking about this movie. But yeah, I saw the TV Glow. It's one of those movies, if you are even remotely intrigued by this, hearing about this, definitely go check it out. Yeah, if you hate having to think about a movie on what certain things mean through a movie, you're not going to like this movie whatsoever. If you hate slow burns, you're going to hate this movie. And there's a lot through this movie that, yeah, you're going to have to just think about and be like, if not, you're going to crap all over this movie. So, like, as far as a horror movie, it's really not a horror movie. Like, if you watch something like this, it's kind of like a Donnie Darko feel, where, like, it's kind of a coming of age tale. It kind of has a sci-fi premise. Certain things that are happening are very otherworldly, and parts of that are quite horrifying, but it's not like a straightforward horror film whatsoever. So if you like something unique, you want something that's quite off the beaten path, this is definitely one to check out. This might honestly, like, if I made like a list of favorite movies I've seen this year, this is most likely going to be on that list. I don't think it's just the most amazing thing I've ever seen, but I love watching movies like this, and every once in a while you get a movie like this that has this feeling and gets you kind of excited about movies again. And at least this movie definitely did it for me, because I feel like, a lot of people feel this way, but it's like you just put something on and it's just complete trash. You just zone out, or you just turn it off because it sucks. But this movie was quite engaging to me. With all that said, I'm going to wrap it up here for Brett's horror vlog. Yeah, I just wanted to cover two movies that were a little bit obscure, a little off the beaten path, but I wanted to talk about them anyways. I like talking about movies, and these were movies that I quite enjoyed for different reasons. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell if you want to see more stuff, and that way you're notified. I feel like with algorithms with YouTube, it's like, I feel like a lot of people aren't notified if they're subscribed to me, and they're just not getting notified that I have a new video out. So, but hopefully you enjoyed more of the content on this channel, and I will see you in a future video.